Welcome to the Capital City Crew podcast. Join your hosts Jeff, Owen, Josh, and Herman as they dive deep into the game of Malifaux. Explore sophisticated strategies and creative combinations, but always remember in Malifaux, bad things happen.
All right. Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Capital City Crew podcast. We are here today to talk to you about the April Fool's Vassal World Series tournament. And we are joined in studio today with a special guest, our friend from Texas, Andre Demings. Andre.
In studio.
In our virtual studio through the magic of the internet. So welcome, Andre. Welcome to the podcast, and congratulations on, spoiler alert, winning the April Fool's tournament series.
Thank you very kindly. It's great to be on. When you guys invited me on originally, I was like, Capital City, I've heard of them, and so I had to do like a bunch of research and stuff. Started listening, but it's definitely exciting to be on here, and I'm definitely glad to have won the tournament. I was not sure it was going to be possible with this dark horse Anya pick coming through the ranks, but I managed to pull it out.
I never doubted you for a second.
Spoiler, Josh was the dark horse Anya pick.
God, there's just so many spoilers right now.
I know, so many spoilers. But before we get to any more spoilers, I just want to put out a big plug and a thank you to Nick Westbrook and the other folks who are organizing the Vassal World Series. We talked about it in our last podcast, but they have been hard at work since November organizing worldwide events for people on Vassal every month in, month out, and it's been awesome. It's been great turnout. I've gotten to play with a guy in Sweden, which is super sweet. We've gotten a ton of amazing data from it that shows that Malifaux is actually really balanced in terms of win rates for factions. So they've been doing a stupendous job keeping the meta alive, mixing metas up. So big shout out to them. And if you listener, by the time you're listening to this, we should be about halfway through the May event. So check the forums, the weird forums in the Vassal subforum for the latest standings and also for announcements about the next June event, which you can get in on, and we'd love to see you there. So without further ado, let's go to a little segment we like to do each time, which is our 10-minute tech talk. So as is tradition with new guests, Andre has offered to tell us some of the secrets of his special tech of his favorite master. So take it away, Andre.
All right. These tips will be relatively exclusively useful for devoted servants of the God Empress Nekima, but it's also going to be useful if you want to avoid these tips being used against you if ever you should fight Nekima in the wild. The first thing that I wanted to bring up is now with Enraged by Insolence being FAQ'd to work again. That is to say, now when Nephilim die within 6 of Nekima and she's taken her bonus action, she can push up to her move and take an attack. It conveniently does not have the words that would say like killed by enemy model or anything like that. So what this lets you do, as Josh can tell you from our last game, the things like the Blood Hunter can charge into hazardous terrain and die, which will let you give free attacks to Nekima, which the cost of a totem for a free master AP out of turn is a pretty significant change for the game, I would say.
Potentially two attacks. Potentially two attacks them.
Correct, because it's its own activation, so you could even take the shove aside trigger as well. It's a pretty big boon when you need it.
And you don't even need the hazardous terrain. The hazardous terrain definitely makes it easier, but Stampede on the totem plus Regurgitate lets you do a decent chunk of damage to it very reliably. So
it does. Now, tragically, you can't pay the cost for either that ability or Regurgitate to actually kill yourself, but it makes you pretty able to die quickly to whatever else you can provoke. Even as something as simple as like Black Blood pustuling the last point, with a Shaman or Hayridin or anything like that, to start the splash. And then also the free attack, of course. And the other thing that I enjoy doing very much as a dreaded Nekima main is what I like to call the Terratot slap fight. The idea is that, of course, you'll never hire Terratots because why would you? But the option for Harridan to summon them after models have died to Black Blood gives you the opportunity to have them attack themselves or others, namely probably Matures or Nekima if she's feeling healthy, to do like a poor man's pustule, essentially. So they'll run up, instead of, I only have bad cards left in hand, I really need that last wound off that hard to kill model. Instead of actually taking a direct attack, which could conceivably fail, you'll of course just have whatever friendly Nephilim standing nearby to soak an attack, probably take a min point of damage, and splash onto that model you needed to kill. Much more reliable. You might even get more tots out of it with Harridan Zara. And, tears of your foes and all that. So it's definitely something I enjoy doing.
That sounds positively nasty. And it's interesting because I have not actually seen Nephilim in action in 3rd edition, like at all. Like I haven't seen Nekima on the table since Herman liked to roll with Nekima in 2nd edition. So
I can answer why that is. And despite Andre's love of Nekima and being an aficionado with her, most Neverborn players for M2E were not happy that Nekima became a master and then like literally kind of stayed as she was. She got interesting abilities with her crew, but like most people were like, I've played Nekima for the last 2 or 3 years, and you literally just said she's a master now without giving her anything else except throwing a corpse, which didn't come up a whole lot. It's usable, but it wasn't that great. So most people were like, I'm going to go to these newer things like Euripides, or, I'm going to stay with the tried and true Dreamer. So a lot of Neverborn players were very upset about Nekima not gaining much.
Says Jeff, the Neverborn player. That makes sense. But it sounds like some cool tricks. Like I did not actually know that Harridan summoned Terratots. Like that's a whole new mechanic that didn't exist before. Like I assume they still grow, right? Like they get bigger. Yeah. So that alone sounds like it really increases the crew synergy.
Absolutely.
I'm a fan of unresistible auto damage, as is evidenced by playing Anya, so I approve of all of this.
I also like it as it gives, as a Nekima player, people will rightly say that Nekima's playstyle, while nuanced in mobility, is not very nuanced in what you're doing. So it gives you kind of a mini game to play with yourself in terms of like, well, I could kill this model with this last sword swing, but it's on a health, no one's going to heal it. I'm going to save that model for later and splash on it to get tots, as kind of if you can manage it, a win more mechanic. Much like Von Stuck summon kills, you can reasonably assume that getting tots out is obviously going to increase your board positioning, and if nothing else, typically models will die, drop a corpse marker, and at that point the tot's already halfway to being a young, and young are some of the most efficient uncard supported minions to just deal damage and take attacks anyway. So I definitely love the ability for Harridan to summon tots. It used to be an ability that Nekima had on the True Mother upgrade back in 2nd edition of causing Splash to summon tots. But it brings an avenue and a play style that I like a lot more because, at least for me personally, when you hire things like Matures, they're great models and they're worth their stones. But if they drop, it hurts. But if you're like, he's almost dead, but I got these 2 new tots out, you're like, this isn't so bad. It's definitely a morale booster for sure.
Nice. Well, listeners, let us know in the Weird Place post or via email to us or on the forums. Let us know. Give this a try. Tell us your love or hate of Nekima, and maybe we'll do an episode all about her in the future. All right, so cool. So we're going to get to our main thing, but we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to jump right into, well, actually, not right into the tournament, but like a little bit about like the format of the tournament, what that means in terms of like how we do picks, what factions we picked, etc., and then we'll get into the rounds. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
Hello. Do you like our podcast and want to ensure that it continues to run? Maybe you want to hear our outtakes and unedited footage. Or perhaps you're just flush with cash and you like being generous. Either way, we've set up a Patreon just for you. If you like us, please consider donating. Our Patreon can be located in the show notes. If not, we're all pretty sure that it's Herman's fault. Either way, if you like our show, go ahead and leave us a comment. Thanks.
All right, welcome back, folks. So before we get into the rounds and the picks, let's talk a little bit about the format of this. So this is different than your typical Malifaux tournament. It's more like kind of like a league, but done in a tournament style pairing format. So you have 1 week per game, or per round of the game, and folks were paired with potentially people anywhere in the world. So you really needed that week, depending on time zones, because some time zone differences were potentially upwards of 8 hours if you got like California to Poland or something. So it meant that everyone was playing the same round each round, and being in Vassal, it actually created a dynamic that doesn't exist in person, which is that everyone played the exact same map. Usually maps are effectively random at a tournament. You might have some sort of like the top table is X or Y, but like usually you're effectively random there. But in this, you got to know exactly the map, and everyone played the exact same map. I'd be curious to know, do you all think that, or what sort of effect, if any, you think that might have had on the game?
Oh, consistency is nice. Though everyone does get to look at the map and be like, oh, this map was designed by a guild player, or this map is going to make Fuhatsu overpowered, kind of comments that you see going through the Discord. And, in many cases, they're not wrong.
I think that actually gives an opportunity, though, when it gives you a chance when you see a map and you're like, hey, Fuhatsu or somebody with range is going to be really good on this map. It lets you, first of all, you can see the map ahead of time, usually like several days ahead of time. So you can adjust your crew, maybe bring in some more things with concealing, bringing your own terrain, but it also lets you change up your tactics some. I wish there was a mechanic in Malifaux where in the beginning you got to effectively decide who picks sides first, and you could potentially cheat that. But in this, someone was designated as the attacker and someone was the defender. So if you were the attacker, you got to choose where you were going to deploy. So that was a pretty interesting mechanic there. Andre?
I would say what I really like about it in comparison to like normal live tournaments is there's never going to be a situation in which you're bringing a crew based on, what you suspect your opponent will bring and then the schemes and strats, and then show up to a table and realize that your crew just cannot play on this table. Like if you're a martial fanatic and you're like, oh dude, I'm playing into Terra, my recruiter's going to be able to hit things in space, this is going to be awesome. And then you see them all, a table with a bunch of severe terrain and you have to get across the center line, like that blows. But with Vassal, knowing what each map is going to be exactly in advance lets you kind of say, well, I'm going to have to put the marshals aside, bring base so that I can ignore some of that severe terrain and get further up the board. So I really like it from a competitive standpoint that you don't just kind of get, a throw of the dice to see if the board supports your kind of crew's playstyle.
And the Vassal tournament organizers put out the packet with the maps in it at the beginning of the month. So you do have plenty of time to look at that and consider what you're going up against and what you can bring.
I'll also put in a plug just for Vassal as a format. It has the advantage of, it's really nice to be able to screenshot what's happening. Like if you're going to write a battle report, you have a perfectly pretty picture. Andre, today, before this podcast, actually was in the middle of his next leave game and was able to save the game and come back to it. Like, how awesome is that? Like, you can't do that in real life if you have to go get dinner or something. So there's definitely a lot of awesome pros to Vassal. Although we can't wait to also get back in person.
And if anybody's listening right now that likes coding things, if somebody would be able to code something for Vassal that recorded the actions that you take, so that battle reports can be given easier, that would be a very helpful tool. Like, hey, this person moved here and it just, like model moved X and then these cards were flipped. Like, that would be really interesting. And I'm sure that the players as well as potentially Weird would be interested in that.
Actually, how cool would that be if you could just, I mean, even if nothing other than sort of like a replay of the actions, so you could just sort of see that as a video of like boop, 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 like life, this guy dies, this guy moves, like see that sort of happening in a playback format, which is obviously in Vassal because you have the back button, which rewinds every move. So you could probably do it. Anyways, we don't need to sing the praises of Vassal too much. Let's talk about what did you all pick going into this sort of last. Well, we didn't know at the start whether it was still going to be Gaining Grounds 1 and like when Gaining Grounds 2 was going to drop. All of us were in the beta, so we knew what was coming and we thought that it was going to drop. And I think the organizers also thought it was going to drop right at the beginning, but didn't end up dropping until round 4. So everyone was like,
it was round 3, actually.
Well, yes, it dropped in the middle of round 3, but they didn't change the mission mid round. So like everyone was just kind of.
We appreciate that.
We do, yeah. But everyone was kind of waiting to see like, what is it coming this week? Is it coming this week? So, what were your all's thoughts in terms of faction picks? Like, what your goals were for going into this?
For me, knowing as a beta tester what was coming, I was eager on both sides of GG1 and GG2. Going into GG1, Dreamer was crazy strong, and there's this kind of runner's high of being able to lucid dream all of your weeks out of your deck and then just crushing it. And so I knew that GG1 was going to be strong, and then kind of having the peek ahead to know that the mechanics and the interpretation of the word another would really combine well for Nekima. I knew that even if it dropped in the middle of the tournament, I would still be really happy to continue to play Neverborn. Neverborn was a for sure pick for me. And like I said, I wanted to catch Nekima's rise to power with the new GG, and I knew it was good. I was for sure hoping that it would drop that month. So that's why I chose Neverborn.
How about you, Josh?
Well, this was sort of the like capstone of my extended experiment in playing Anya a whole bunch. So I was like, I'm just going to take her and main her through the entire tournament. I'm just going to run her face first into every single strat and scheme pool and see how she does. I was pretty excited for the changes to Towards and Away, because she has a Union Buster, gets to exploit a lot of that on a regular basis to really have some potential for some careful tactical positioning. Like, I was like, oh man, if I go up against like Jedza, I can use a way to carefully position models outside of her aura so that I would then be able to kill them and deny Jedza her protective features because of the way that I can push things using Towards and Away. So I was stoked for that.
I went the opposite way of Andre. I knew what was coming, and I was doing this as a last hurrah for my Explorer Society before I switched back to Neverborn. I had already I've been playing Explorer Society for about a year now, and I was already getting the itch of wanting to go back. I missed Dreamer. I miss Zoraida. I love Zoraida, and I'm looking forward to getting back and playing more games with my Neverborn. But I knew for a while that what was going to be happening to Explorer Society, particularly the focus change. And I started off this game thinking I was going to be playing Ivan throughout the whole tournament. But midway through, I decided, you know what, I'm going to play the last 2 games with other masters that I love and just be done and move back. So that's kind of what my thought process was.
And as for me, so I initially thought, and I talked to the guys, I was like, all right, is this when I finally just solo the Vix in an effort to get enough reps for us to record a podcast about it? But I keep always feeling like, yeah, I'm going to play the Vix. And then I'm like, they're just, I don't know if they're great for this mission. So I was like, all right, I'll play Outcast because that's my main faction. And we'll kind of let the chips fall as they may, depending on the matches. And like when we talk about round 1, well, actually we can, I guess, just segue into round one, and I'll go first. But for round one, Jeff, having played a lot of Explorer Society, he was like, "Hey, what?" I was like, "What do you think people are going to bring?" And he's like, "I think Ivan for round one." So I was like, "Okay, I'm playing against Explorer Society. I'm going to go with Von Schill because I hadn't played a lot of Von Schill. It'd been a while." And he has some anti-concealing tech. So I thought that would be pretty cool. Also, for the benefit of the listeners, we'll just recap the mission for round one, which was wedge symbols with leave your mark, assassinate, research mission, hidden martyrs, and sabotage. So my thought process was, all right, wedge is not bad. It actually could potentially be a Vix game, but Von Schill also doesn't mind being in the middle. Symbols, you've got some options to protect your own stuff. You've got some tricks with being able to use Hannah and the Midnight Stalker to get like a free teleport and move your guys forward to try to take symbols. But mostly I thought around counterplay. I thought I was going to be facing Ivan. So I was like, let's take a bunch of scouts who ignore concealing and say, get wrecked. I'm shooting rocket launchers at all your stupid guys and using Eric to prevent summoning. But spoiler alert, it didn't happen. It was Nexus instead, which still has summoning. So Eric helped. And I still got to shoot rocket launchers and things. So that was cool. But my opponent in this round, Joseph, who's super awesome to play against. This was like one of his first games with Nexus. So props to him for trying to learn a super complicated master in a tournament setting. So I think that put him a little bit on the back foot. So I was able to take it 4-3 because we had to end due to time. But it ended up working out okay. I don't know whether it would have worked out okay against someone who had a lot of reps of Nexus, but I'm maybe on the Von Schill hype train now after that. Jeff, how about you?
So going into this, the reason why I thought Ivan was going to be a good pick is just between Ava, English Ivan being able to place, and somebody bringing in Calypso as a side. It's just a easy symbols grab and go for them, especially with the map. There was a lot of blocking terrain that was on the map where Eva could just jump to it. And she has. I brought Winston in for this. And in my game, I played Ben Jules, who's actually on the committee for the leagues, and great guy, super awesome to play against. But in the end, he played Guild. He chose Guild, and I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to be expecting Guild to bring. He brought in Dashel. Dashel is actually super strong right now. I think he accomplishes a lot. And between Dashel summoning and the Lone Marshal, coming out, and basically I summoned every round and the Lone Marshal killed it every round. So before it got to activate, that's just how things go. But the game plan going into it worked out, and I basically won on the strategy. He denied the last point of the strategy by it was in a very far corner, and he went and stuck all of his models next to that thing. Like, you're not going to get this. And I'm like, you're right, I'm not going to get it. I'm going to go get my strat points or my scheme points. And that's kind of how the game ended. But great guy to play against. And the tech Owen was alluding to earlier is giving your with Von Schill, giving your scouts the rocket launcher so they ignore concealment and shoot you with the rockets, because for some strange reason rockets ignore concealment when the scouts shoot them. So it's interesting, but yeah,
they're precision rockets with their scope. How about you, Josh?
See, I was on the other side of the table from Von Schill in my game, going up against Dan Brown, who was one of the organizers of the UK Masters. I was really worried going into this because, Eric's in keyword for Von Schill, and he's really annoying against the kind of Anya crew that I play. I've played against him, against Eric before, and you can play around him. You just have to do it, and it's something I was thinking about a lot. And then when we got down to our crews, he didn't take Eric. He instead took he took Mad Dog to get through probably Sovereign and the Emissary's armor, which is a good pick. But instead of a game of me trying to dance around Eric and throw him out of position so I can use my place effects, it was a game of me repeatedly engaging Mad Dog so that he can't shoot me. Or if he does shoot me, just dump the attack off onto the Emissary, who can either make it miss, have the wounds to soak it, or have the wounds to soak it. He did try to box or bury the Emissary on several occasions with Hannah and Glimpse of the Void, which was a good trick, but I saw that one coming, so I was able to stop it. While Ava did my scheme running, her being able to teleport and also having Don't Mind Me was clutch, and I was able to take the game and have the joy of lobbing Hulk Hogan into hazardous terrain and then putting him through the wood chipper, which was just extremely satisfying.
Yeah. Well, it got you an 8-1 win, which catapulted you up to
the heights of terrified people who I successfully beat by virtue of some misplays on their part and good luck online.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that in later rounds. How about you, Andre?
For round one, I chose Dreamer because this was GG1 and I was still high on the opiate of lucid dreaming. I also knew, so Radek is a very good player, but he also knew of my famous hatred for Nexus. So right off the bat, he messaged me like, hey, we're playing round one together. I'm playing Nexus. And I was like, okay. So Dreamer, I knew would be like my best shot at beating Nexus. So that's what I locked in, just because Nexus relies on a lot of simple duels to try and get you parasited up, and Dreamer's good about not failing those. I chose Leave Your Mark because it's Leave Your Mark, and you should always take that unless you're just playing into some kind of Ski Marker God. And then I took Hidden Martyrs on Stitched because Stitched can attack people, intentionally fail the duel, and then die for Hidden Martyrs. That ended up working out pretty well. I will say that Radek has utterly destroyed me on some occasions, but this was not one of them. The crew that he took didn't feature some of the key pieces that I consider Nexus to require, which is either the Effigy or the Emissary, which he didn't have, or the Cryptologist to double his Berserker Husk production rate, which he did not have either. So with those pieces, I was less afraid of what could come, and then with the mobility of Insidious Madnesses and Daydreams, I was able to take the symbols pretty quickly, while kind of mulching through his front line with stitched together duels and all that fun stuff, and the relatively universally low willpower of Nexus's crew, if not Nexus and the Archivist.
And I've said this before on this podcast, Nexus and generally a lot of Explorer Society is terrified of terrifying. Insidious Madnesses, you can't imagine how many terrifying duels Explorer Society, in particular Nexus crew, fails due to terrifying.
Yeah, and typically Nexus players feel confident that Berserker Husk's Ruthless will carry the day, but if you can just keep beating on their Willpower 3, like having to divvy out all that damage into their crew with like Stitched Gamble Your Lives and things like that, and Hard to Wound becoming less and less of a factor as the weeks get siphoned. It's basically Nexus summons, Dreamer summons, but Dreamer's deck gets hotter too. So that's pretty much what carried me for that round one.
Yeah, makes sense.
So there's a 7-2 finish.
And this is one where I actually ended up taking Hidden Martyrs because I figured, because I was taking scouts who are going to be, or at least one would be somewhat forward deployed, I figured he was going to bite it probably pretty quick. Like he was going to go for a symbol, get a symbol, and then probably get immediately eaten by the Nexus bubble, which is what happened. So got the point. And then I took the Prospector, who is always going to be backfield, but actually has decent movement tech. You don't usually use it because they just hang out drawing cards in the backfield. But I was like, all right, well, I can zoom him up, give him rocket boots, get up there. We didn't end up making it far enough in the game to do that second point, but it's an interesting tech. All right, so we're gonna leave it there for round one. So at the end of round one, all of us won our games. So good. In a good spot. Some more than others, or harder wins than others. So we're going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to go through the rest of the rounds and tell you all about our picks. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
And we're back. On to round 2. The setup for this one, the mission was corrupted Lylons with corner deployment. The schemes were take prisoner, vendetta, spread them out, let them bleed, and claim jump. So I'll start off with this round. Again, unsurprisingly, picked Anya. Still going for the solo. In this one, I was actually paired up against Landon Sheehan, the guy we had on the podcast to talk about Jacob Lynch. And he was playing Jacob Lynch. This actually was a really strange mirror match for my last game with Landon, which was a flank corrupted ley lines of Anya versus Jacob Lynch. So I knew some of the stuff that he was planning, at least in terms of his scheme runner, which again, sticking with the one Udo to rapidly move across the board. I was expecting that, and I decided to not make the mistakes that I made in my previous game with him, and I took Calypso and the Good Doctor to do a lot of my scheme running, because what's better than 12 inches of movement in a round for one guy? 24. And this crew that I was facing off against him was his last hurrah of the samurais with trained ninja being placed right next to your deployment zone and having the ninja guns go burr all over you. So I had to deal with 2 of those right in my face right from the get-go. To try to counter the rest of his crew, I had brought Vernon and Wells for the negative flip to willpower duels to try to make it less likely that he's going to obey me, or at least not obey me on a positive flip by consuming my brilliance. And by my opponent's admission, he felt as though he lost the game from deployment, which I guess is the risk that comes with the double ninja samurai tactic, that he had placed one of his samurai in sort of an awkward corner, and as a result, it failed to take out Vernon and Wells during its activation, and then for the rest of the game, it was kind of off where it couldn't really do very much. And I then spent the time basing the other samurai to keep it from shooting everyone, and had just an incredibly lucky turn of it trying to disengage from Mikhail, and me getting double moderate on my negative flip disengage duels twice to completely tie it up so it couldn't get away, and it was then torn to pieces by a combined effort of Mikhail and Anya beating it with the swords and shoving it through hazardous terrain. I think the ultimate disrespect, unfortunately, because no disrespect to Landon, because he's a great guy and was a great opponent, was killing the samurai with Sovereign's auto damage trigger on Fly With Me to just casually wipe it off the board. And then I went on to have Anya go up and kill the one Udo, and once that guy was done, it was all sort of fell apart from there. And I ended up with a 6-3 win out of that one.
Dang.
Yeah. It was a red joker saved in my hand from the beginning of the game to win initiative on turn 3 to take out the Wen Udo. So I was just sitting there waiting for that moment.
That'll do it. So I had pretty much the opposite experience of you. So this is when my fortunes for this tournament went in the opposite direction. So again, I was paired with explorers. And this time I figured, all right, for sure, this is going to be either Nexus or Ivan. And so I thought, all right, well, who do I want to take? Let's mix things up. This might be the last game of GG1. Why don't I go with my girl Tara? So Why Terra? Well, she is she's pretty mobile. This map was going to involve a bunch of like random walls in places and some weird building ruins. So she has a teleport. I took out of versatile. I took in Hans because I wanted to do some ignore concealing against all of the concealing Ivan guys, and wanted to be able to like stay at range to try to pick people off. And I took Eric as well out of keyword to try to prevent summoning. So the game plan was basically summon, the usual thing, like summon guys, be able to jump through the hazard terrain in the buildings, etc., and try to take them out. Unfortunately, I could not hit a model to save my life, and I got in my own way. Like I held the Nothing Beast, I moved it into the middle of my crew, and then like did not think about the fact that it being height 3 blocks line of sight from Eric to Aeonis, which now means a Brock Inspector was coming out in the middle of my crew. So I was like, as soon as I did it and like passed, I was like, oh no, what have I done? So of course, Brock Inspector comes out, and then like no one can hit it. Like everyone whiffs. Terra took 5 back-to-back attacks against the Brock Inspector, and it was always severe for terrifying, a 2 to attack. Severe for terrifying, a 3 to attack. Severe for terrifying. On the 5th attack, I flip like a 10 to pass the terrifying, and I flip like, I don't know, like a 10 or an 8 or something to hit. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to do some damage. I hit it, Black Joker for damage. And I'm just like, oh my God. So, of course, the Bracken then turns around and is like, yeah, Aeonis, like that guy who's really important to your crew who was secretly chosen as the claim jump target. Yeah, I'm gonna kill him in one go. So turn 1, I was down my henchman, my claim jump, and it just went way downhill from there very quickly with everyone dying and like multiple Brock Inspectors. Like it was a mess. So Ivan, very good. Definitely need to practice against it. Jeff, how did Explorers treat you?
Actually, I think we're going to go over. Andre is going to put in his inputs.
Andre, how did Neverborn treat you?
Like a dream, of course. So I even got my game in on Tuesday because I was afraid it was going to drop on Waldo Wednesday, and I went with Dreamer, and it was into a Maw player on Bayou, and this unfortunate gentleman had just played into me. He's a guy from the Pacific Northwest meta, and we had gotten a game in a league that they were hosting, and I had done the exact same kind of Dreamer build into him, and it didn't go well. And so this was kind of his rematch round, and it still did not go terribly well for him. Basically, what it came down to is Bayou's universal lack of high willpower and fighting the Dreamer as his lucid dreams get hotter and hotter. I will say, though, that he did give me a run for my money in the first couple of turns, just because I had to play, like, my entire game plan had to center around the fear that Trixabel was going to lure me off of the corrupted idol or the corrupted leyline markers. And so I had to build, like, a wall of dudes around each corrupted leyline to make sure that she couldn't see the model that needed to be lured. And then between that and, like, the daydreams moving stuff around. I will say, though, that whatever model you think is most lethal in Dreamer, it's actually daydreams. Those guys would flip severe for damage on Negs or the red like every third attack. And so just like huge chunks were getting taken out of models from 3-stone support minions. And I'm glad it's gone. Lucid Dreaming was dumb, but man, it was awesome when you got to use it.
You just made Teddy cry by making that statement.
Teddy needs to step up his game. Like, I can literally hire 3 of those things and still have the stone left over. Like, it's no comparison. But the game ended up going 8-3 to me. There was some blow for blows, and he actually ended up taking out one of my Insidious Madnesses unexpectedly early with a Bushwhacker. But the summon game is strong, and it was able to close out 8-3 in my favor.
And to wrap up this round, I played English Ivan into this, and my thought was in corner. Well, I was at the time I was going to be playing English Ivan through the whole tournament, but it was corner, and I have an interesting unpack with Ivan where I take 2 nocturnes, and in the first activation, the person holding the stone is a nocturne. He makes Gibson DeWalt move forward and then walks his way up to wherever he needs to be in range of putting the stone in. And then following that, Gibson DeWalt goes, puts down a shadow marker and links it in with another shadow marker that's 6 inches up the board. And then he gives, depending on what your cards look like, he gives the Brock Inspector fast and focused, and I forgot what else I did with him on that turn, but following that, another Nocturne pushes both English Ivan, who is an Umber model, and the Brock Inspector forward, and they both get teleported up the board. And then following that, Winston Finnegan picks up one of the remaining models that's left behind, drops it on the shadow marker, which then teleports both of them up the board when you have the crow for you. So basically in your first activation, your Brock Inspector, English Ivan, and another model have not gone yet, but you have 3 models that are 9 inches up the board ready to go to work. And I'm like, hey, this is I gotta get to test this out. This is going to work really well. Unfortunately, my opponent was playing also Explorer Society and declared Maxine Agassi. And spoiler for this one, Harada makes English Ivan not very good. He's got an interesting aura where all of the either EVS or performer models around him cancel all of your positive flips. So suddenly English Ivan is not able to summon anymore unless you have a crow and use a soulstone. So it became a lot more difficult, and in the end, my opponent played really well. Was able to lock down English Ivan with an Intrepid Emissary towards the end of the game and managed to kill my Nocturne that was carrying the ball to where English Ivan received the ball and was engaged by the Intrepid Emissary and couldn't get rid of it, so he could no longer shadow jump either. So he's just kind of stuck there where he is because he couldn't place, and I couldn't pull off the last movements I needed at the end of the game in order to try to pull out a win. So it ended up being a 1-point loss, and it was a pretty big swing. But so ended my thoughts of playing English Ivan throughout the rest of this tournament, and I decided the rest of this was going to be fun. So that's how my round 2 went.
Nice. Well, so 2 of us up, 2 of us down, and we can see how it goes in round 3. So who wants to introduce round 3?
I think Andre should introduce round 3, being our guest.
Well, of course. Well, for round 3, it was flank deployment with recover evidence as the strategy. And the schemes were breakthrough, vendetta, runic binding, let them bleed, and catch and release. For round 3, this was finally the first round where the errata dropped before I played the game. So my crack cocaine habit of Dreamer finally came to an end, but I got to return to my true first love, Nekima. And I was up against Jamie Varney, one of the strong players out of the British meta, and he was on Rezzers. So I ended up locking Nekima into his Kurai. And Nekima, generally speaking, really likes this matchup. Black Blood doesn't do favors for Kurai, and the method by which Nekima deals damage, which is big, chunky, focused attacks, does well into Ghosts. So I was fairly confident being in this matchup, but it did end up being a lot closer of a game than I wanted it to be. I chose Catch and Release since Matures are really good catch and release targets. They're likely to live. They're likely to get where they need to go. And it worked out for me on that one. I scored 2 points for Catch and Release. And then Let Them Bleed because, Nephilim will eventually get everything below half just by right of Black Blood. And I only ended up getting 1 point for that by the end of the game. But it ended up being very close because at the end of turn 2, I had dove hard with Nekima, and she died at the bottom of turn 2. And I was not sure I was going to be able to pull out of that nosedive, but I did because Harridan and Matures are bad dudes, and I got a lot of summons off with Black Blood pustuling into the middle of Kirai's crew, and then Harridan taking splat bad attacks worked out pretty well. I never actually ended up killing Kirai, but I just kept engaging Kirai's stuff and covering recover evidence markers with mature reach and stuff like that. There was also a key mistake that Jamie ended up making about partway through turn 3, I want to say, in which he blew like 3 or 4 AP from Datsuba and I think Kirai as well to bring down a mature, one of my 2 matures at the time. And then he checked his scorecard and realized he brought down the wrong mature for Vendetta.
Oh no!
So it's like, oh, this is terrible. And then coincidentally, it was also the mature that wasn't my catch and release mature. So like,
oh no!
All those cards and effort expended, and it ended up just like not scoring any points for him. Props to him for being honest, because I don't think I can see your schemes even in the app for like what you name for stuff. But so he ended up having to like run off to my deployment zone with Datsuba to just like score a breakthrough, and then just kind of accepted that Harridan and the matures were going to be able to score, or the remaining mature, and then the boys I was summoning and eating corpses with were going to be able to close it out. So yeah, it went 6-3 to me at the end of that game, but it was dicey.
Wow, that impressive with losing your master on turn 2. So nice job.
And pro tip in there: if you're playing masters like Dreamer or Kirai that rely on protected, Black Blood is going to make you have a really bad day.
It's definitely a tech that we get to get around, and I will say though that Black Blood is not even as cool as Shove Aside. Shove Aside to me is the reason that protected ends up not being great, because you'll have that model that you'll keep behind to make sure Dreamer or Kirai is safe, and you're like, all right, haha, here's this station or whatever, some tankier model. You can be like, all right, cool, flick, all right, you go over there, you can't protect this person anymore, and now I'm gonna eat him.
It's especially funny using that against Kirai, because you can just shove spirits wherever you want to go.
They're can't so even helpfully incorporeal.
They're so useful like that.
I really appreciate that about them. But yeah, it was definitely a blow to the morale to lose Nekima late, like turn 2. But sometimes she's just got to die for the greater good, and it worked out.
We got to do the Nekima podcast at some point, because like that's in those instances as the opposite of when you play against Nexus. It's like your vengeance, like haha, you take a damage back, and you're like, okay, cool, you take another damage.
Yep.
I went up against Neverborn Zoraida, played by David Goodman. This Zoraida matchup is like, obviously you're going to take Vernon and Wells into a Zoraida matchup, and in this case couple it with the Intrepid Emissary to try to keep attacks off of. Even though I don't believe if you redirect with the Emissary attack, you get the benefit from the Vernon and Wells aura. Just the fact that you can keep the certain things off of Sovereign. Like if you was going to take Serena for the armor pen,
Josh, for the benefit of those who don't know Vernon and Wells, what is the obvious aura take that it's bringing?
So Vernon and Wells has Head in the Clouds, 3-inch aura of enemy model suffered negative flip to attack actions that target willpower or are resisted by willpower.
So anti-obey.
It is anti-obey tech. It's anti-lure tech. It's anti a bunch of things that that Zoraida can do to you to make your day very unpleasant. But as it turns out, that didn't matter greatly, because the crew that my opponent brought was a focus all of your obeys to obey a doppelganger that has duped one of Serena's abilities to just try to mow down your crew with either willpower or defense targeting, armor ignoring attacks. So that was the style of crew that they were playing. Bring along Hinamatsu, because Hinamatsu is another great model to obey. Lots of attacks, positive flips, good damage. I, in this case, went Vendetta on Mikhail versus Hinamatsu, because I knew I wanted to get Mikhail up in Hinamatsu's face. And it's possible to... And you have pretty big chunky damage that you could typically get some through on Hinamatsu, and frequently, unless they're expecting it, I wouldn't suspect them to stone to prevent 1 damage. They'll just be like, oh, 3 damage goes down to 1, I'll take that 1 damage. And if that's the damage that would put you to scoring Vendetta, I feel as though you could pull off that little bit of trickery. And breakthrough, because Anya's just great at crapping out scheme markers wherever she wants them to go. So first turn, my opponent got their doppelganger engine revved up, had duplicated Serena's ranged attack, and moved her in position to do some obeys to do some damage to Sovereign, who had moved up the board. Fortunately for me, Sovereign decided to top deck like a god. And even with his defense 4, managed to avoid both the obey attack and the second obey attack from their mask trigger to stay standing. At which point I was able to throw Anya into her crew and have her bounce Mikhail up into that mess. So now there are 2 models almost in their deployment zone, neither of which can be obeyed. And also are preventing Zoraida from obeying her own crew. It was set up around obeying her crew to do stuff to me, and hostile work environment just shut that down. So we did have a misplay where I had charged the doppelganger, and my opponent didn't remember that. Neither of us remembered that the doppelganger had disguised until the next turn. So I did get a free extra swing on the doppelganger, but that had gone too far to go back, unfortunately. So with that, I was able to take the doppelganger a little bit more easily on the start of turn 2, get Serena down to having used her Demise Eternal, and put a goodly chunk of damage into Hinamatsu by use of Bleeding Edge and Union Buster to just shove them back and forth through terrain. So everything sort of fell apart after that point. Like I said, 2 models that can't be obeyed in your face at the start of turn 2, while the rest of my crew just got to come in and murdercate things. Did not make for a good time for the Bayou Witch. So I took that one with a 8-1 victory.
Hey, so for this round, it was actually a notably interesting map, I think. This was a map where there was a river going through the entire middle of the board, kind of diagonal, and then a bunch of bridges across it. So that, I was like, okay, I like this as an Outcast player. I can shoot things. That's going to be interesting. So I was curious what I was going to be facing when I faced, finally, not Explorers at long last, but Arcanists. So I was facing off against Jeremy Peace, who I've met and played with in person many times from the Carolina region. Great dude. He ended up declaring Karis. He was like, hey, I want to do like a last hurrah of GG1 with Karis before I like go switch off to other stuff. And I figured at this point, I'm like, all right, I'm out of the running for any kind of like realistic placing. So finally time to play Vix. Let's throw him down. Let's see what happens. The errata had come out, so I had the option of the improved version of Big Jake. So I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's throw in some Vix. I took a relatively standard sort of Vix list, all the usual stuff. And it worked out. It worked out surprisingly well. Jeremy had not played against a ton of Vix, so that I was able to use the psychological game a little bit to my advantage by kind of having them poised on the edge of coming in. I was able to get some good movement going. And I was able to send in a Vic turn 1 and take out the Eternal Flame. So the Eternal Flame, it's not a total linchpin, but a fairly important model to the Karis crew. He thought he'd had everything protected by using the captain to drop some concealing markers, but I was able to give the Vix the plus flip so they could cancel that and take it out. We did subsequently, like later in the game, realize this was a misplay because he forgot the captain has a damage reduction aura, which would have made me spend another AP. Probably would have ended up the same, but I've never had a game of Malifaux where you didn't realize after it that something somewhere on the line you like messed up. So slight asterisk to that. But from then on, the Vix pretty much just do what the Vix did. Like they ran in, they just killed everything. Like they killed Karis, they killed Borgman before he could activate on turn 2. Just what like the wombo combo of the two of them like chain activating each other. They were just able to do a lot of damage. Meanwhile, but Big Jake had an interesting piece in here because I took Vendetta on him because I was like, all right, if he tries to die, he'll just bury and come back. That only works if he dies before the last turn. So I almost did not score the point at the end because he almost died, which would have caused him to be buried and just dead at the end of the game. But the regen kept him going. But Jeremy made a valiant effort to try to stop me, but I was able to take the win on this one. So lots of fun, and maybe I'll play Vix again. I don't know. Maybe this will be the Vic and Von Chill
Power
season. Hour. Yeah, exactly.
Going into my game, once again, the rest of this tournament was for fun. Decided to play Jedza because the last two, I like English Ivan, I like Jedza, and I like Nexus and Explorer Society. They're the coolest models, or the coolest crews. So decided to play Jedza into this, especially since it was a recover evidence game. There's a lot of killing involved in the strats and schemes, and Jedza is particularly good about making it to where you don't kill her people. Unfortunately, I was once again facing another player from Spain. I've collectively called, they were friends. I've collectively called them the Spanish Inquisition because they came in and tormented me. He chose Von Schill, of all people. And
for those, Von Schill, man, that's
let me tell you, Von Schill is particularly good against Jedza, and I've mentioned this to a couple of other people, and they're like, "Well, how so?" I'm like, "Well, because he runs in, grabs your guys, throws them outside the bubble, and then just kicks the shit out of them." And you're like, "Oh, well, that's a fun thing." Now, don't get me wrong. If the game would have been able to continue past turn 5, like once I got my bubble up there, his people just started dying from all of the hazardous terrain, and like they were quickly getting wiped out. But at that point, it was a little, too late. And he made a clutch move. Breakthrough was in the scheme pool, and he took a free corpsman, and instead of doing anything else with him, he broke him off and did a dead sprint towards my deployment zone. And I'm like, that's his other scheme. He's got breakthrough. I turned Winston Finnegan around, went back over, used Dirigible Ride, shoved him back over where he was, and then engaged him with Winston Finnegan, slowed him, and kind of stuck him there in the end. And I was like, he doesn't get any points from breakthrough. It's not going to happen. Turns out he didn't have breakthrough. He was literally just bluffing that scheme. And I was like, oh, damn. Like, completely, like...
just hook, line, and sinker.
Hook, line, and sinker. And
hook, line, and dirigible.
And that one move is actually, it ended up, I lost by 1. And that one move is what actually cost me the game, because instead of moving Winston Finnegan over and stopping him from picking up one of the evidence markers, he instead, I wanted to, instead of denying 1 point, I was denying 2 points. So like, this is a smart move. No, it was a horrible move, and it cost me the game, and that was really dumb on my part, and I probably shouldn't have done it. But kudos to him. It was a great play, and getting shot by rockets when you're trying to get up the board with Jedza, and where your guys are all kind of a little low, and then having Von Schill come in and just start throwing your guys out of the way, not too fun. It didn't feel very good.
It's the year of Von Kill. Calling it now.
He's pretty good, especially he brought in the combo of Hannah and Eric, where Hannah was hitting me for 7 points of damage, and then Eric was just smacking the crap out of me. Like he was pumping out a lot of damage. He didn't hit me very often, but when he hit, it hurt. Yeah, Andre, what's up?
I just wanted to give a shout out and say it's really great to actually hear about any instance ever of someone bluffing a scheme and it working out. It's been so long since anyone's bluffed anything, and did not hear it just like, yeah, I didn't realize you weren't actually going to do that, but actually like, nope, that definitely cost me the game is awesome. Like even in throws of your defeat, like that's a great game of Malifaux right there.
Absolutely.
It was, and I do miss in M2E. I realized that my gameplay has been slacking because in M2E we used to bluff schemes all the time. You would I don't even remember the name of it, where you had to have a scheme marker within 3 corners of the board.
Power
so
ritual.
the first like everyone would be like sticking a scheme marker there, and you're like, does he have it or does he not? Is he bluffing this? Like those are parts of the game, and it's like that was a clever move on his part. So kudos to him.
There's one other thing I'd like to point out, specifically about the gaining grounds or the errata and how it changed things. Because I played my game post errata as well, and the changes to Serena did have a meaningful bearing on this game. The loss of 2-inch reach meant that Mikhail could deny her the ability to attack my dudes, because I could block off the path to Mikhail, and she could no longer reach him with her freaky tentacles that she inexplicably had. And the decrease from 8 wounds to 6 is the difference between needing 2 min 3 attacks or 3 min 3 attacks to drop to the Demise Eternal level. So the fact that I could get away with 2 shots to get her down to having to burn Demise Eternal is a substantive change, even though it's not numerically that many. So something to keep in mind when trying to deal with her in the future, because she's still good. It's just the changes do have an effect, and you can plan around that.
They do, and in this game, I had been playing, as I mentioned before, I played English Ivan the first 2 games. I just grew accustomed to playing English Ivan, a ratted version, so this entire tournament, I never went above 2 focused on anybody, and I never stacked, detracted, and focused on English Ivan. It's something that I had gotten used to of, why switch over to the overpowered version when you know what's coming. So, but moving on to round 4, the missions here were standard deployment with break the line, and the schemes were deathbeds, outflank, bait and switch, hidden mortars, and claim jump. Now, keep in mind this is now using the new Gaining Grounds 2 rules, which we switched over in the middle of the tournament, which some people are caught a little bit off guard with that, but it was good and coming, and we might as well embrace it. Yeah, go ahead, Owen.
And I'll just say, I was looking at the packet to refresh my memory of what the map looks like, and so the name of this round was Remember the Alamo, and remember Nick from Texas. I literally just realized that he made this map with the cobblestones on it in the shape of Texas. Like if you go look at the pack,
what
it is the outline of the state of Texas. So clever job, guys.
Wait, hold up. I gotta see this. What?
He was so excited putting these maps together. Because he had shown me previews of each map, and so when he had gotten to this one for Come and Get It, I think is the name of the map, he was like, "So how do you like this one?" And I was like, "Oh man, I'm so excited! They can't deny us now. We're on a world stage."
Oh my god, they did. Oh my god,
right? Oh, that's so great.
I just want to point out that this was some hidden interference by the organizers, that they gave Andre that hidden morale boost.
Oh yeah,
of seeing Texas there, and that's what determined the outcome of.
I didn't realize that there was home field advantage going on here.
Absolutely.
But this is the level of bespoke production that we're getting from the Malifaux World Series right here.
So I'll go real quick because it will be very fast. So for this round, my plan was let's live the Von Schill dream and bring him. But my opponent was in Poland, which meant we were on a pretty significant time difference delay, and we couldn't play until the very last day, the Sunday of that week, and according to him, his dog ate his router, which sounds like a silly, like, dog ate your homework excuse. But, like, the poor guy was like, the stores are closed. I can't fix my internet because, like, everything, like, at his time, it was, like, after 6 or whatever on a Sunday. So we did not end up getting to play. I hope that you got your internet fixed, my friend. But in general, though, it has been awesome. Like, we had Jeff played someone from Spain. I played
two people from Spain.
I played a gentleman named Alexander from Sweden who ended up placing 5th and was a super nice dude. So really cool to be able to talk to folks that there's like no way that you'd really ever have an event with them, except maybe like one of the UK international events.
Hey, we may have an event in Slovakia sometime. You never know.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so that was me. Jeff, you want to talk about your round, and then we'll let Josh and Andre give the two sides of their final match for the top table.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to follow up your riveting match of nothing. I was playing actually against Landon in the final round, and Landon and he and I were both like, yeah, this doesn't matter for anything. Like, we're already out. We both wanted to play fun. I was going to play Nexus, and Landon had this great idea that he has a theory that Shenlong is actually good against almost everything in Explorer Society. Now, I can't say everything in Explorer Society, but I can tell you Shenlong against Nexus is really freaking good, because Nexus relies on a couple of ways of getting parasite tokens, and that's basically how Nexus plays. Is they're very reliant on that parasite token. But between Chi and Butterfly Jump that was on a couple of his models, you're getting one attack off usually, and that attack is never going to hit, because if you're hitting with your Shambling Nests, they're stat 4, and when you're trying to hit a stat 7 or in some cases 8, it's not going to happen. So in this game, I literally did not get a parasite token on anybody. And then the other reliable way of getting out a parasite token is to kind of stack poison onto something, and then Meredith can just reliably put a parasite token on that person. Unfortunately, Shenlong, I don't know if it's at the beginning of his turn, but he gets to just randomly take a condition on himself and give it to something else. So he would just take my poison and give it right back to Meredith Stanley. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a thing that's happening. And the final nail in my coffin, and I apologize to Landon for this. I will never say that card flips cost you a game, because it's your skill that matters more than anything. But in some games, they don't help you. And I had to take a screenshot of after I had gone through half of my deck and had not seen a single card above 9. And I actually spread this the screenshot around, and he was like, oh, that, like, in round 4, I believe it was, I just flipped my deck over to him. I'm like, so this is what I'm working with. He's like, yeah, your turn's going to be shit. And I'm like, yeah, and then I kept flipping cards thinking like, nope, there's no way that this is going to keep going. And literally in that whole turn, I flipped about 3/4 of my deck. I saw one face card the entire turn, and he literally just demolished everything. Like, we were tied up in turn 3 at the end of turn 3, and then turn 4, like, everything on my side of the board except 2 models were just dead. And I was like, okay, well, that's a game that happened, and let's forget that this ever happened. But if you're looking for counters to Nexus, Shenlong does a great job.
Make your opponent's deck cold and you win.
I just want to point out that random number generation does allow for clustering, so you're just demonstrating that effect to exquisite levels. So thank you for that.
And there's nothing. I'm not taking anything away from Landon's skill. He played a really good game. And the counter pick of Shenlong, I'm stressing this for all you players out there that think Nexus is really broken. Shenlong is like, I would consider this to be a counter to Nexus, because all he has to do is be like, yeah, I'm going to use Chi, and your shambling nests are basically useless at that point. And between that and Butterfly Jump, where you're only going to get one attack off, it's really difficult. And he has a lot of card draw between. He was using Sensei Yu with Hurricane, or was it with the Hurricane Punch? I don't remember, but it lets him draw like 2 or 3 cards every punch. And like there was a lot of card draw that was going on. So him having to discard for Nexus's Hive Strike was irrelevant. You'd be like, yeah, okay, you hit me, cool. Discard a card, I don't care. I'll just draw more cards when I activate again. And then Deathbeds is the scheme that he chose, and with being able to move his own models up and take the markers with them, like Shenlong's really good at Deathbed. So it was a game that Nexus was didn't do so well in, and unfortunately that's my last Nexus game for a while, and she goes out on the bottom. So luckily I actually got to spectate the entire game of Josh and Andre's game, and it was a really good game. And this is my opinion, I think the game came down to a single upgrade that Andre took that turned the tide, or that not really, but that was the initiative flip was, I think, the big thing that turned the game. But I'm going to let them talk to you about it.
All right, who wants to go first with your pregame thoughts?
I'll leave it to you.
Well, I can give a capsule description of my interpretation of the game. Is that
okay?
If you have bad luck and inferior play, you can usually recover from one of those two, but if you have both, you kind of deserve to lose, and that's sort of what I ended up doing in this game. I had been stressing out about this, and I was trying to figure out what to bring against a Nekima crew, and I settled on a tech pick of the Grave Goo because they can remove a model from the board for a while, and they can get around some of the 2-inch reach, and I had not played with that one very much. So I did a poor job unpacking and did not get my models into position, and my opponent capitalized on that excellently and had some really top-notch luck to just clear Sovereign out with a young Nephilim, getting the Onslaught and then Severe twice to take it from full to dead in one activation on 1 AP on the charge. So starting off on the back foot, and then my opponent leveraged the new improved interpretation of the rules surrounding Enraged by Insolence to murder his own models, or use when I murdered his models to pump more attacks into Nekima, or more attacks from Nekima. So some very top-notch use of the abilities to capitalize on the mistakes that I've made through that. But I want to hear what he thought of this. I don't know how much you've actually gone up against Anya and what you were thinking about that.
To be honest with you, I'm actually rather scared of Anya because on one hand, like Kid aside, anyone who's been maining something, and not just maining something, but crushing it up to this point, definitely has something going for them. And so when I had seen you'd taken your rounds to get to the top table on round 4 with exclusively Anya, I was already like, oh man, he's got the sauce. And so I spent a lot of time panicking about this game as well. And then I also had to adapt to the new strategy, Break the Line, because normally my favorite way to play Nekima is double mature, henchman of choice, whether it's Candy or Harridan. In this case, it was Harridan, and then the Blackblood Shaman to hand out focus. And I had to drop a mature with Ancient Pact and break it down into 2 youngs because I felt like I needed the body count to move the markers around. And honestly, the young picks extremely worked out. I know that for that turn 1 when Sovereign came up and tossed the marker, and then I ran up and stabbed him to death, I was doing the math in my head already, right? Because I dropped him down to, I think, 3 wounds, and he had armor 2. So the neg severe was awesome, but I was like, all right, as long as I burn a focus, deal moderate, he'll take 2, and then I hit him again, take 1, defense 4. I got him in the bag. That was my whole plan turn 1. It worked out even a little better than I thought it was going to. But as you had mentioned in that moment in that game, once you overextended with Anya to take revenge, I was like, oh man, I think I might have him. And it was still absolutely a slog up to that point, right? Because, Mikhail came up and you had started burying Nikima with the Grave Goo, and it was really just like rude, like she needs to be on the table. I want her to splash on stuff, and her falling off the table every turn was actually pretty annoying. I will say though that it did feel like a secret Masaki hole, because Nikima, not by her own will, of course, but just kept falling off the table before like Mikhail would activate, and I was like, okay, sure, I'll be here. But
yep, nope, yeah, absolutely. I think there are a couple of. If I didn't get a chance to try this one out. If so, I may have picked up on that, but I think there would have been some better flex picks for that. I think the Archivist for the initiative, always solid, and willpower range attack, always very solid. The Tide Caller toss is really good, and the ability to reposition enemy models with the mask trigger. They're still 1-up on stat on attacking Nikima, and I can use that to move around his other dudes, but I did not take those. Yeah, no. Basically, a lot of Anya comes down to unpacking properly, and there's a lot of moving parts. I think Nikima unpacks a lot more elegantly. Because
Nikima doesn't have to unpack.
Because
they fly over everything.
She's, in my opinion, a incredibly good pick for Break the Line, just because interact, move, interact is on your entire crew is a really solid capability. That is just a really excellent feature to have on a crew for Break the Line. So I think she's just a all around like top notch pick for the strategy. I will say Mikhail did a admirable job of using Flush with Cash to try to deny some attacks from Nikima. And I don't think Flush with Cash is broken because it costs stones. It costs 2 stones to apply or to take, and then 1 stone each time you want to activate it. So you really want to use it on master or in situations where stopping that 1 attack is a really big deal. Like stopping 1 attack from Nikima potentially stops 2 attacks from Nikima, stops messing up the positioning. So it's a lot more than just preventing the damage. So I think it was still a worthwhile take and not something I would always take. And I haven't always taken it on Mikhail, but against Nikima, I think that was the right pick. And I think it did keep Anya alive for a little bit longer in that situation.
And I want to throw in here, some people may think that this is broken because they did weird interactions where, like, they took it on an intrepid effigy or emissary and then passed their attack off to the emissary. Like, you can't do that stuff. The other thing is, if you go to attack a model with it, they choose to do it when they declare the action. So if you were planning on using focus, you don't use the focus, like your focus doesn't get used. The attack doesn't happen. Your focus, like you declared that you're going to use your focus afterwards. So like the stone gets used, your attack goes away. Your next attack, which since you can only use it once per activation, can then use that focus to get that. It's not as broken as some people play it as, where it's like, oh no, you declared focus on that, it's gone now. That's not how that works. So just make sure you're playing it correctly.
And also, thank God it's only once per turn. If it was once per activation, I would be a very sad boy.
Once per turn. Sorry, yes,
yeah.
Just making sure. But I do want to speak on that for a bit. I think that Flush with Cash is fine in crews that don't summon. I would say that Flush with Cash, when you see it in a Nexus crew or an Ivan crew, becomes a lot more frustrating because both of those have models that can die at a whim. That is to say, if you kill one of my, eyes and ears or whatever, like no one cares, and you probably have 2 Flush with Cashes on the table anyway to protect either the Archivist or Anya, or Dr. Meredith, or whatever combination of 2 models you want that on. And then you're just like, all right, and there's 2 Soul Stones for me and a card for Meredith, and you're like, I really don't feel healthy having that happen. But in this instance, I think it was a masterful selection on Mikhail to, rob Nekima of one of her attacks in a big turn. And that did happen. And it was something that I had forgotten about. And I was like, oh, right. Yeah. Crap. So all the math I was doing for 3 attacks isn't going to work out. There was definitely a bit of mental scrambling once that had occurred. And I agree. It was very well used here. But it was definitely a skill choice, that I appreciate.
Yes, if I had unpacked the emissary better and had him up in a relevant location, then you can start deflecting even more attacks away from Anya, which is what I should have done. But I, a fool, did that thing I always tell myself not to do of overextending Anya, and I 100%, 1,000,000% overextended Anya. So I
Yeah,
absolutely deserved the loss in that, and it was handed to me quite deftly.
Well, thank you.
You guys didn't know about this because Josh wasn't paying attention. We have a chat for the Capital City crew, and I was calling the plays to both Owen and Herman, letting them know what was going on in the game. And I was like, Josh just moved Sovereign down here. The young Nephilim are going to go after him. It's going to happen. And then sure enough, there goes the young Nephilim shooting across the board. No one expected the first young Nephilim to just rip through Sovereign and kill him. And that just was not something anyone expected. But I was curious how this was going to go because I know
you expected it, didn't you?
I did. So that opening turn, I had 3 kings in hand. And one of them was the mask, and I was like, "Oh, dude, man, I've got this in the bag." But reading the board, you're not like, "Oh, for sure, young Nephilim takes Sovereign, no problem." Like it didn't look that way. I definitely agree.
I was curious how this was going to go, though, because I know Nekima and particularly Andre plays a lot with the triggers that the Nephilim use, and Anya hands out stunned like candy. So I was like, "How is this going to go?" Because can't declare triggers when stunned, and it was really interesting how that was going to work out. But it turned out that the Nephilim were just particularly faster, and the stunned didn't actually happen. So once Sovereign went down, that was a pretty clutch moment. And then I think it was like turn 3 or 4, one of the two. Andre, he had a king in his hand, and he went for initiative. He's like, nope, the initiative's mine, and there's no way that you can beat it because I have Ancient Pact. And from that point on, it was just Nekima activates, and I'm going to kill like 2 or 3 of your models, and that's the end of it.
Yeah. In my internal post-mortem of the game, I was like, yeah, no, the stun would have been a better pick in some of those situations, but you die, you learn.
Yeah. Sometimes that initiative flip is majorly consequential. Like in my game round 3 with Jeremy, I held the red Joker to save for initiative so that I could do the double Vix rush in, and like that kind of sealed the deal there. It was like, oh, well, crap. All right. I guess all my guys die. So.
Yeah, I did want to mention though, I feel like, so the early game turn 1 for Anya and Nekima, I think was defined by, and why you felt like you were unpacking poorly in the early game, I think, is usually because the reach of the Nephilim makes people afraid to leave their ball. So, you have your Intrepid Emissary, Phalanx moving up, but as soon as you leave the boundaries of the 2-inch take the hit Pride lands, like the Nephilim can capitalize on it immediately. And so like trying to aggressively move up to the board into something that requires it, like break the lines where you have to move up and spread out, it can definitely cause a lot of hesitation. And I think that was what initially was going on before the incensed rage of seeing Sovereign go down brought Anya into the fray.
It wasn't even just so that was part of it, but actually the reason I thought I unpacked the emissary poorly was I should have just double walked with him. Like, even like I shouldn't have used him to try to move up the Grave Goo. I should have just double walked with him to get him into a better position for protecting the models that I can move up. Because if I had just taken him up the board farther, I would have been able to move the rest of my crew up the board in relative safety. So that was, but it wasn't just revenge on the Nephilim. I also didn't want you to be able to casually push or throw my marker back that was actually a larger portion than simply revenge. I mean, the revenge is not like not zero, but like also to mitigate your ability to just push it back, throw the break the line marker back into my crew or back onto my side of the table. So yes, not entirely revenge. There was nominally more consideration thrown to it, but yeah. I think the emissary, if he had just double walked, he would have been in a better position to influence the board on a number of different levels. But I didn't do that.
Well, as an Akima player, I can say with confidence that my only motivation would have been revenge. I would have been enraged, if you will,
by someone's insolence, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Yes, you're game mechanically enraged by insolence, not just casually enraged by insolence.
I will say though that was my MVP for round 4. Definitely goes to what did I think I named? Was it? I think it was Young Money. That the young Nephilim that had came in and just top decked Onslaught both hits and took Mikhail from like 7 health to hard to kill in one activation, and I was like, okay, this works for me.
That young Nephilim was on point. That guy 100% MVP. Absolutely, no questions asked.
Oh God. And then you're in the black blood, so you can't even hit him back. Like, because if you do, you die.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think I got Mikhail out of there with something.
No, you chose not to activate Mikhail and in that round, and you could have at least activated him to either move him out, but you went with somebody else first, and Mikhail didn't get to go anymore on that round because he could just die right after.
That was pure luck, by the way. Well, so because the plan was obviously, the Blood Hunter ran into the Surveyor's aura to die for the glory of Nekima and feed her an attack. But by that point, like, I was out of cards in hand, so I was like attacking a defense 6 model. I had to stone for the plus flip just to feel safe about it, to get Nekima's attack in on that 1 health Mikhail, because I was like, I can't risk that.
Yeah.
But that was it for me right there. That play.
Yeah. I want to throw something out there for the listeners here. There's something that happened at the end of this game that I thought was very telling of top players that play this game. When Josh said, you know what, I can't win this game, we're going to call it, I think it was like the end of turn 4 or whatever. They were going over what would have happened in the game. And Andre at one point was like, Josh was like, yep, I'm going to lose by this amount. And Andre was like, no. What are your schemes? You would have gotten this point because I wouldn't have stopped it. And that is a very, like, the people that aren't very good at this game are going to be like, yeah, I'm going to try to inch every point that I can. But the good players know they're good players. And you're like, no, respect to my opponent. You would have gotten this because I wouldn't have stopped you for it. Like, don't be that guy. Like, give your opponent credit. And, like, I was impressed by that, sportsmanship.
I appreciate that.
So, yeah, well, so there we have it, folks. The April Fool's tournament, you heard it here. So if you want to get in on the action, signups for June are now open.
I will say, if you want to be able to lay claim to a large percentage of the victories of a particular master, there was a period of time where I got to lay claim to every single Anya win that was made in the Malifaux Vassal World Tournament. Like, all 3 of them, those are mine. Someone else has got one since then, but my brief shining moment was looking at the stats and being like, wait, there's only X number of wins for her. I've won X times.
There you go. Well, with Gaining Grounds 2, you have a new chance because it reset. Well, I mean, they're keeping all the standings, but like, you could be the first one to score points with a given master in this season. So
Anya's super fun.
Between both, I think Andre and Josh will both agree. If you get really good with one master, even going into scheme pools that may not be perfect for it, if you know that master front and back, you're going to do well with that master, even in bad scheme pools with it. So if you're new to Malifaux, pick a master that you like, learn it well, even if it's a dark horse pick. As Josh showed, like, not many people are playing Anya, and Anya can pull her punch or put out some damage. Same thing. Not a lot of people play Nekima, and Andre's been maining her for a long time and is wrecking face with Nekima. So if you have that dark horse pick and you just play and get good at it, you can take it to a tournament and be playing at the top table with them.
So I guess for some quick closing thoughts, do you all? So obviously we've been doing Vassal because of the format of the pandemic. The pandemic that's happening. Do you all think you're going to continue playing Vassal once things sort of open up more? Like, what's your outlook on the future?
I can jump in on that one right away.
Yeah.
I think Vassal is the best way to get games of practice Malifaux in that there is. I was an avid every week at Dragon's Lair, my local gaming store, playing games, just trying to get familiarity with models going.
Yeah.
But I mean, you'll spend 5 hours getting there and back. I'm going to Austin, stuff like that, set up, breakdown, chat and all that. With Vassal, you can be like, hey, I'm looking for games. Someone hits you up. You get a whole game in from the comfort of your home in like 2.5 hours. And that is so handy. And at all times of the night, like, if I'm at 1 o'clock in the morning, you have people in Poland or whatever looking for games at that point. Like, that is so handy. I know that as soon as the Rona started affecting our lives, I was getting in like 3 or 4 games a week for months. And so I got so much Malifaux in because of Vassal, and I think I'm going to continue to play it for that reason. I also know that some of my favorite players to play into, my boys out in Houston, Brian Bauer and Nick Westbrook represent. I really only get to play them consistently with the power of Vassal. So I'm definitely keeping Vassal in my arsenal, even once we return to whatever sense of normalcy there will be.
I'm going to be doing the same thing. Nothing is a substitute for getting with your friends, drinking some beers, and shuffling some cards and playing a game of Malifaux. But at the same time, I also have been working on my unpack method, where like, how would I deploy in this situation? Well, you can figure out the inches, those things don't change. So if you're in this kind of deployment zone, how would you unpack? And that's how I came up with my Ivan unpack of getting all those models up the board. I was like, and at the same time, you can also basically play that first couple of activations, like what cards do I need to look for in my hand to ensure that I'm able to unpack how I want to with the right statuses and things like that. Those are things that you can figure out, and then you go into your first turn and you're very confident. And I think that's where a lot of Malifaux games slow down, is people aren't confident in their play, and so they slow down and have to think a lot, and something didn't go how they planned. Well, this allows you to get more comfortable with the game and to figure things out on a more progressive level.
Yeah, 100%. And I will say too, doing beta testing, it's so useful to be able to not have to go figure out a proxy or play with just like a base with like junk written on it, or like this model counts as this model. Like, you can just be like, yes, I have access to every model in the game in my electronic wonderland, and then I can take screenshots to give to the developers. Like, so for battle reports where that's really important, it makes it easy. So I'm definitely keeping Vassal in my rotation. Honestly, I'm going to be so sad when I no longer have access to auras when I'm playing in real life. I'll be like,
God. Like, whoever first pointed that out was like a god of how useful those auras are.
I'm gonna struggle so much watching people overmeasure in real life again. Like,
yeah.
And let me tell you, can we spend a small little time to praise the dude that made the undo button? Because I can say, when in testing, it is so great to be able to be like, oh shit, we read that rule wrong, or we played that wrong. Hold on, let's undo. Right click and reshuffle. Boom! What would have taken like 10 minutes before is done in seconds. Like, thank you, whoever made that undo button.
Shuffling, like playing Masaki, like having to be like, all right, cool, I use Abandon Honor, and now I have to shuffle like with my hands. Like, I have to right. I can't just right click and it's shuffled for me. Like, what is this?
What is this hellish meat space that we inhabit on a regular basis? And why are we even there? No, I think
it will. It will undo a lot of the your opponent right-clicking on your discard pile and being like, hold on, what cards? Okay, yep, the red joker's already been used.
Yep.
Go ahead, Josh, sorry.
Yeah. Seeing people when it is no longer a terrifying experience or a decadent luxury will be exciting. But I think having the ability to get more games against more people will, I think, persist even once things open back up. It's just such a great opportunity and there are great people playing around the world at all hours of the night. There are people on the Malifaux Vassal Discord that are all over the world, so you can always find a game against like truly top-notch opponents there at any time of the day.
And I also would say that it's interesting to see Vassal as kind of the great bridger of divides in terms of like what metas do. I think that that's been one of the most interesting things when Vassal first started becoming like the way a lot of people play Malifaux exclusively, is that, you know, people out of Texas, we have no one that plays Arcanists really. Like we had like one guy that would play it occasionally, but most of us were like Neverborn and Ten Thunders players, and we're like, yeah, they're definitely the best factions. And then you have people who come out of the East Coast or Russia or Poland or whatever and be like, oh no, actually the most dumb thing is Arcanists, or, you know, it's this Somer build or whatever. It kind of cross-pollinates all of the metas, and I think it's actually leads to a pretty holistic understanding of the game, just because you see so many different approaches to the game that you think wouldn't change geographically, but definitely do.
Yeah, and I think this current month's tournament, which I didn't get in because I have other tournaments and playtesting and the hellish experience of work to deal with, but this is the first tournament where they're allowing two masters, multi-master crews. And this may be the grandest experiment in Malifaux to come out in recent memory, because there's a lot of disparate opinions as to how good they are, how the change to how they're announced are going to affect it, yada, yada, yada. And it's just none of it's been tested extensively. And this may be one of the first really large-scale tests. I know they did some in the UK right at the beginning, and people have done it here. I've played a couple of multi-master games, but I don't think many people have really done serious multi-master to the point of learning it.
Come on down to Texas. We've been playing No Holds Barred since the start. Your boy got Nikima Lilith games in, and it was just not as good.
I'm not saying that people haven't done it. It's like, I don't think anyone's like done it exclusively or done it in a tournament setting on a very large data set. The large data set is, I think, going to be a really interesting thing to come out of this.
On the data, though, sorry, Jeff, I have to put in a commiseration or like I feel your pain for the guys out there running the Tableau server who now have to deal with, oh wait, no, there's two values for master? Like, you just blew up their whole data model.
I just want to point out that Andre just said that he was playing around and testing like something that was wrong on 3 different fucking levels. Number 1, it was multi-master. Number 2, he resurrected fucking Dead Man's Hand Lilith. And number 3, fucking Nikima and Lilith. Like, Nikima's the one that fucking killed Lilith. Like, what the hell? That's just wrong on all levels there.
I dragged her corpse back to serve my purpose, and when I decided it wasn't worth it, I put her back in the box. It was so nice.
That is some cold shit right there. That blood is ice cold and black.
That's pretty funny, though.
I will throw out one more shout out for Vassal. A gentleman reached out to Owen and I, he was brand new to Malifaux and wanted to get into the game. And Owen played a game against him, and he wanted to play Pandora, and I kind of helped to coach him as he was playing Pandora while he was playing on Vassal. So, and he was somewhere in the central U.S., but we were able to kind of introduce a gentleman to the game, and the game didn't go so well because, you know, Owen's a good player, but it was good that, you know, he could have somebody that understood the master explaining how it worked while he played, while at the same time playing against somebody that was helpful. And it's just really interesting mechanics that you can use. And he would be able to show me what cards he had in his hand so I could help him plan out, you know, his activations and how he should work. And he got a good understanding of how Pandora works from that. So, you know, that's the really good shout out for Vassal for that.
Yeah, there was actually that was. Thank you for bringing that up. I totally forgot about that, but that was such a fun experience because it was doing the demo game. Like I enjoy doing demo games, like teaching people how to play. But having Jeff there, because I've played against Pandora, but never played Pandora, so like it's a complicated master. So if he's like, "What do I do?" I'd be like, I don't know, shockwave me, and bad stuff happens. Like, so having Jeff there was super helpful because I could just focus on like explaining core rules, and Jeff would be like, "All right, so here's how your stuff interacts with this." So
yeah, specific like he showed me his hand, so I could tell him like, look, in this instance, Baby Cade is in a position. Normally, a lot of players would just charge with Baby Cade, but you have this card in your hand, and I don't remember, like 13 of Mask or something. I'm like, where you can lure him to you and then get an attack off because you gain fast and you actually gain more AP from doing that than rather than just charging in, potentially putting you out of place and putting your model in risk. So now you're bringing him to you, but you haven't costed yourself anything. And it was easier to explain those type of things as if like I were playing the crew without like it's really hard playing a demo game with somebody where you're like, here, let me explain to you how you should work to beat me, when at the same time you're like, and how am I supposed to play against you when I'm telling you exactly? That's really awkward, but it really helped out in this case.
Yeah. So there you have it. Any closing thoughts? Last plugs? Anything you want to plug on the pod, Andre?
I just want to give another shout out to my boy Nick Westbrook for putting together the April Fool's tournament. It was a ton of fun. I got to enjoy repping Texas in the final round with the big W, and I look forward to more Vassal games and more in-person games as things start coming back.
Fantastic. Well, there you have it. Thanks for joining us, Andre. Great to have you on. We'll have you back, and we'll have to do an Akima episode in the future. And till next time, thank you all for listening. Let us know in the Weird Place post what you thought of this episode and what you want to see in the future. Till next time.
Peace out.
Peace.
See ya.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Capital City Crew podcast. We hope you tune in next time.